This is Khora Prime, the 5th most used Warframe in 2023. Finally, after 5 videos, I can show off one of my favorite grouping frames, but Khora is way more than just that. I know a lot of people love her 4th ability, Strangledome, as a hard crowd control that grabs enemies and holds them there, but honestly, I don't really like that ability because you have to come prepared with something that can properly clear them out. But it's not even necessary, as Ensnare is much easier and still super useful. It's nice to not need a huge amount of range, as Ensnare is a grouping ability that's much better used by targeting crowds that are already pretty close together. So in the end, most of her build is just taking advantage of Venari's buffs while spamming Ensnare, but I also double dip on buffs by adding Roar in place of Strangledome. Her first ability is Whiplclaw. Strike a group of enemies with your whip. Damage and range are affected by mods, but range caps at 200%. This is a damage ability that is affected by melee mods, making a stat stick pretty necessary. I've definitely seen a few different builds that really take advantage of an insanely strong stat stick to turn this ability into a map wipe, but because I use randomized melee weapons, that would never work for me. Her second ability is Ensnare, one of my favorite grouping abilities. Target an enemy as the source of the snare. All enemies within range are pulled towards the target in waves that trigger based on duration. Both stats are affected by mods. This is one of 2 methods for grouping abilities, with this one relying more on targeting enemies that are already pretty close together. It'll pull enemies into a small enough group that one-shot guns like the Kuva Shakur work really well. Whipclawing the group will reactivate the pull effect. Her third ability is Venari, which is also her passive. Venari is a permanent Kavat companion that Khora commands between 3 stances. My choices from best to worst are heal, attack, and defend. You get bonus movement speed as well as any mods like Animal Instinct stacked with your companion. In the heal stance, Venari heals any ally below 90% health, running to the one with the lowest health and giving a 10-meter healing aura. Attack targets a single enemy every 3 seconds, locking them down and striking 5 times with guaranteed slash procs. Defend knocks down and disarms 1 enemy every 3 seconds. Cooldowns can be subverted by marking enemies directly. Her 4th ability is Strangledome. Create a dome that pulls enemies into each vertex. Whipclaw spreads 50% damage to all enemies, but honestly it's only necessary in a few very specific situations. So I've replaced it with Roar, which I'll explain in a bit. Khora is a pretty unique example of a triple Umbra tank. Having that much free strength from Umbral Intensify means it's easy to have balanced stats that benefit all my abilities including Roar. But the other side of that is I have 2 Tau Forged Blue shards for energy max, and a Tau Forged Yellow for bonus energy, which are pretty expensive. And this is the reason why I'm using Roar. A triple Umbra tank only needs Arcane Grace to survive, so that means I can use Arcane Avenger for free crit chance, in addition to having Roar with a decent amount of power strength. Obviously, when you talk about a frame with a grouping ability, you'll need at least 190% range, which uses 3 slots if you don't want to lose strength. 155% duration will almost always be your first mod on every build, and at 221% strength with help from 2 red shards, you're getting just above a 70% damage buff from Roar after growing power. So in the end, Khora plays just like most other tanks. Having well over 1,000 armor gives you about 80% damage reduction, which allows you to keep your focus on spamming Ensnare, so as long as your buffs are active, you'll have more trouble finding enemies than killing them. Alright folks, that's right, welcome back to the second half of the video. As always, I've been kind of just running around doing nothing while I wait to start the video, so let's just get going explaining what's going on. Obviously we're talking about Khora Prime. Obviously the most important thing that I'm going to be showing off in this video is just the Ensnare ability, so you know, a lot of it is just going to be me running around talking about what's going on and then just showing off how I use Ensnare. So you're seeing I think the main thing that should be noticed is that I'm focusing on targeting an enemy that's near other enemies, and the other nice thing is that you can activate multiple Ensnares at once. So you kind of snare a group of enemies, move on to the next set of enemies, so on and so forth. You will notice that with a lot of these like test videos, I will also mention, because I'm using Ensnare, I can really have some fun with it, so I'm actually using Grimoire, which is kind of one of my, you know, more type secondaries that doesn't really keep up as well as I wanted to. But of course, when you use something like Khora, when you use Ensnare, have a grouping ability, suddenly Grimoire is insanely good, and that armor strip that you get from Grimoire is just super useful. So yeah, that's the main thing to keep in mind. Is the only thing that really matters is keep Roar active, keep getting shots so you have Arcane Avenger, and then of course I've got Venari set to heal. No, I did mention it a little bit earlier, but yeah, of course, when I do these back halves of the videos, a lot of times you'll notice that the life support isn't very high. Like, I actually got a comment about that, and I was like, fair play, but also a lot of this video for me is just, you know, when you're first starting out, you know, the beginning of a survival isn't always great. Obviously, when you're using a grouping ability, it makes survivals so much easier, and you're seeing, like, when the Grimoire has a lot going for it, then yeah, it's a really strong weapon. So yeah, when you're really getting into this gameplay, I think the most important thing to keep in mind is just you're seeing that all you really need is Ensnare and everything else works after that. I will also notice that if you're not playing as well as you should be, then Venari will actually take a lot of damage. I've been pretty surprised at how much damage Venari actually takes. So without the black and white man buff, I'm getting 74% damage on Roar, which is pretty good. But yeah, I mean, you're noticing I'm at 72% life support. It's not super difficult. I mean, overall, like, grouping frames are kind of boring. There isn't really a lot to talk about. It's mostly just press 2 and then use the Grimoire's alt fire, and you're just seeing, like, I'm gonna be at max life support. Like, this is kind of a joke at this point. But yeah, I mean, Venari's heal buff is pretty useful. For the most part, it's like Khora doesn't really need a heal. So what it's really getting used for is mostly just, I don't know, it's kind of a trade-off. It's one of those things where, like, the longer I play Khora, the more I'm like, oh, well, you could probably actually just use whichever stance you wanted to for Venari, and it would work as well as you need it to, because you're noticing, like, she doesn't really need a lot of heal. Like, she's not actually taking that much damage. You know, when she is taking damage, you know, she's getting to about 1,000 health, and then Arcane Grace is activating, and that's kind of saving me. But yeah, I mean, overall, part of what's easy to notice is that this is why I love grouping abilities so much, is that they allow me to use weapons like the Grimoire, or, you know, like the Tenet Spear X, for example, or, you know, all these different weapons that are still really good, but they're going to be best served when you have something to boost it, to really give it that little bit of oomph. You know, the other weapon that I did pull out is the Dread Incarnate, another great example of just a super strong weapon. Oh, and they stole it immediately. Gotta love it. But yeah, I'm dead. That was a Luathrax enemy that just deleted me for all of my health, so let's keep that in mind. I'm gonna run away a little bit, get some of these going. The other thing that you're gonna notice in this exact moment is that, oh, I'm panicking. And so I'm doing the one thing that I shouldn't be doing, which is not casting Ensnare, and that's gonna be really important for you. Is, oh, yep, my cat's dead. You know, my cat's dead. I was focused on the Luathrax enemies, and it almost got me killed. And that's kind of the trade-off with the grouping frame, is with a lot of these frames that have these grouping abilities, you're pretty reliant on that ability. So if you don't have it active, then yeah, you're going to burn through some life support. You're going to take a lot of damage. But then in the end, it's going to be okay, because you just recast the ability, and you're not nearly as scared. I will say the one thing that I haven't really mentioned at all is Whiplclaw, but that's because I just don't really use it. Like, it's useful. It's great if you're using Strangledome and Whiplclaw and also using a stat stick, but that's just not really how I play. I mean, overall, like, I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of comments being like, oh yeah, you should totally use the Strangledome Whiplclaw stat stick combo, but you know, that's the best part about Khora. You kind of just use her however you want. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think of Khora or my build in the comments. As always, if you enjoyed and want to see more, please like the video and subscribe if you want to catch me live.